Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Jason Pepe, and today we're going to be discussing this 25-gallon red Jaboticaba tree that is container grown. It's about 6 years old, and we're also going to talk about some of the important things you need to know about pruning the Jaboticaba trees and growing them in containers. Not actually pruning them, but a lot of information about pruning the Jaboticaba. If you want your tree to produce fruit, there's some important things you need to know. So stick around, don't go away. A lot of you are looking at this tree and you're seeing very little, if any, fruit, but there are some small flowers and there is some fruit on the tree. But I decided to do this video to show you the information regarding the pruning and so on. And this tree has produced plenty of fruit in the past, and I have some videos out there that you guys can check out. You'll see that the tree has fruit. Now, it's never been loaded with fruit, but the reason I did the pruning that I did, if everything that I did is correct, and I think it is, this tree is going to look pretty damn amazing and loaded with fruit in a very short period of time. Within a couple of months, I hope to come back, show you this tree with another video, and hopefully you guys will be impressed. All right, so remember I said growing in full sun is really not the best way, and I kind of explained the reason for that. So let me tell you that the better conditions in the natural environment of the Amazon, where these trees grow, and they're from the riverbanks and so on, where it's moist, right, real wet and moist, these trees prefer to be growing in those areas that are moist, but also with filtered light. So they want the upper canopy to filter out that light. So it's pretty bright in there, don't get me wrong, it's bright, but it's not direct hot sun all the time. So try to replicate the environment of the plant whenever you're going to try to grow something. Any plant, try to remember or learn about its environment and replicate that environment so that you could be successful growing and getting fruit. So let's talk about the fruit. A sabra, which this is not a sabra can take at least 10 years, maybe a little earlier once in a blue moon. I've heard that it happens, but most of the time it's 10 plus years before you'll ever see fruit in the sabra. The sabra does have the benefit that it can handle, like I said earlier, a little more alkaline soil, so that's good, and they're more suited for going in the ground in places where the soil is more alkaline. So you don't really have to grow a sabra in a container, but a red Jaboticaba grows best in a container, as I said earlier, because you're going to need to maintain that acidity, and you do that with that 30 or 40% peat moss that you put in the soil. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about what you're looking at here is the trunk of the tree. This trunk of the tree is clean all the way up to about 26 inches roughly. You can keep that clean 26, 30 inches of the tree this way, and guess what? The sunlight hits it. Sunlight hitting that, not only does it keep the tree healthy and less prone to disease, but it also stimulates fruit productivity, okay? You want the sunlight to hit the trunk of the tree. Really, really important. Now, you're looking at this tree, you don't see any fruit right now. Well, it's not the time for the tree to produce fruit, right? But it will be exploding very soon. We're going into December 4th. So going into the following months, this tree is going to be enjoying a little bit cooler weather, and it's going to be getting that period of time where it begins to flower and fruit for several months on and off. The problem is that it's dry now, so you need to make sure you water your tree. So again, water every day. And talking about water, make sure you're filtering your water so that you don't have a lot of chlorine, because if you have chlorine in your water, you're going to get burnt leaf tips. That's just going to happen. If you can't control it, it's not going to be a problem, but it's going to be a little unsightly. If you want your tree to look fantastic, then you've got to filter out that water. Really important. Right here, and right here, the tree had two large branches coming out real low, and I just kind of let the tree do its thing, and it was producing fruit. You'll see a video. I have a couple of videos on this tree with fruit, and I'll talk about the tree and how I potted the tree up. I took it from a 15 gallon and I put it into a 25, and it's probably been, today is the 12th, right? So this is going on maybe like 8 months now that this tree has been in this container, and it's well rooted and it's doing well. The one thing I wanted to point out is that I removed the lower branches from the tree so that I would have that clean canopy, okay? And then you have all these branches. Now we're going to talk about the pruning part of it, and this is important. You want to know about this stuff, what I'm going to explain to you right now. All right, so here's some important information on pruning the tree. Most of the time, when you don't prune your tree, you just leave it alone, it starts to look really, nice and full, right? Like all these leaves everywhere. But you'll have a lot of small little branches like this one that grow, and they're really not worth letting grow. You don't want this branch. This branch does nothing but steal energy from the larger branches. That's what they do. In Brazil, they refer to them as thieves. These little thieves, right? So these we would probably not refer to as thieves, but that's what they believe they are, little thieves. And actually, they're right. That's what they do. These smaller branches, when your tree is loaded with them, and this tree was loaded with them, but I cleaned it up real nice. So this tree here, with all these little branches growing in every direction, represents a problem. It steals sugar from the main branches that produce fruit, and then you end up with not as large a quantity of fruit, and you also end up with fruit that's not as sweet, okay? There's another aspect to these little branches, and a lot of times these little branches become big branches, and then you leave them alone, and next thing you know, you've got a large branch that's growing inwards, right, into the tree. This one's growing outwards, but I would still remove it. What I mean by an inward branch would be a branch that's doing something like this, right? So let's say the branch was growing this way, right? You don't want branches growing in, so you always prune those branches off. So you want to get in there and you want to clean them up at least once a month. Go in there and clean them up. Another benefit of maintaining this open vase, Brazilians call it the cup. They refer to it as a cup. Okay, we often refer to it as a vase, right? An open vase where a bird can come in and make a big nest in there. It's kind of what you want. You want airflow to prevent diseases. You want the tree to kind of be able to dry out and not be always wet all the time, right? So when you have it open, you have more air circulation, less disease. Also, much more sunlight, right? So you have more sunlight that comes in there. The sunlight is really good because it helps to stimulate these branches to produce fruit as well. The other thing, think about this. If this was a big mess, right, where it was like a big bush and you wanted to get in there and harvest your fruit, kind of hard to do it, right? This way, you get in there and you can harvest your fruit quite easily, a lot easier, less branches to be moving out of the way, and so on. So disease is reduced considerably. The light comes in much more completely, and then also you remove all these branches that can be in your way when you're trying to get fruit, and the little thieves that steal energy from the rest of the tree. Okay? So don't forget that. That's really important. And again, watering is important, sunlight, filtered light, good soil conditions, and let's talk about fertilizer. All right, so let's talk about the fertilizer. Some people love to use nothing but organic fertilizer, and that's okay, nothing wrong with that. Other people use a time release fertilizer that goes into the soil and slowly releases the fertilizer, okay? That is my preference. I use, for these trees, when they're young, I use something like a 18-6-8, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And we're not going to explain all the numbers right now, but just keep in mind that you can choose to use a fertilizer that is a synthetic or an organic type of fertilizer. If you're going to use organic fertilizer, you're going to need to use it literally multiple times throughout the year, probably as many times as sometimes every month, month and a half. You have to keep giving them fertilizer. That's kind of a hassle. It's really, something that oftentimes you don't get around to doing, and then what happens, you forget. Another month goes by, you forget, and then you didn't give the tree the nutrients that it needed, and then you don't get the fruit or the growth that you're looking for, right? So using something that is a time release fertilizer is probably the way to go. It's the way I do it. It works great for me. I've never had any problems with the tree. So if you want to go organic, but choose something that would be an acidic type of fertilizer, something that would work for blueberries, or look for a combination of fertilizers that would combine, maybe you find a standalone nitrogen, a standalone phosphorus, and a standalone potassium, and then look at the numbers on what you're purchasing, kind of mix them together, and then boom, you've got your own fertilizer for your tree. So that's a little tip on fertilizing the Jaboticaba trees. Now also, some people say that you don't want to give them a lot of nitrogen because it impedes the fruiting. I found that that's kind of true, but not so much of a big deal. If you're growing young ones, there's really no issue with fruiting because they're too young to fruit, and you do want to get a lot of growth. So yeah, use a higher nitrogen, but go with time release, because if you use traditional synthetic fertilizers, you hit the tree with it, you give them a lot of water, and next thing you know, all of a sudden the tree gets hit with a shock of all this nitrogen, all this fertilizer, boom, and you can burn up your tree really bad. So be cautious, use a good synthetic fertilizer that would be a time release fertilizer, or continuously feed with your organic acid-based fertilizer. That's my suggestion. That's what I think works really well. That's what's worked for me. What do you think? Maybe leave a comment below. How about that? And by now, if you like the video, why don't you go ahead and maybe consider subscribing, or even becoming a member. Join our membership. You can see the little button that says join. You can click that and you can become a member, and the benefits are right there. It'll tell you all about it. So we hope you join and become members of the channel. The other thing I wanted to point out to you now is that a lot of people don't realize how hard the wood is on these Jaboticaba trees. It's really hard. So when I come back, I'll tell you more about that. All right, so we said that the branches of the Jaboticaba tree are really hard, and if you're going to prune the tree, if you have some pretty thick branches, you're going to need a saw, that's for sure. You're going to have to manually use a saw, or if you have a small kind of a sawzall, you can use a sawzall. But you definitely want to use a saw or a very heavy-duty pruner to cut through those branches. The other thing that's important is when you are pruning the tree, there's one thing that a lot of people do that causes you to lose your trees, to get them sick. It causes all kinds of problems in the long run. So I'm going to demonstrate for you in just a second how to properly cut off the branch, okay? How to prune it. So we're going to come in for a close-up. I'm going to show you how to prune, and this is really important. All right, so let me demonstrate with this small little branch. We could consider this branch what the Brazilians, as I said earlier, like to call little thieves, because they're tiny little branches. Now this isn't really a terrible branch, but I'm going to use it as a demonstration for you. This branch is growing downwards, which is not recommended. You want branches that grow upwards. This branch is fine in the sense that it's in this direction. It's not in this direction, right? Because if it was over here, you'd want that branch out. But the reason I'm going to show you that I'm going to remove this branch, it is a small branch. It is kind of bending upwards and everything, but just for the sake of demonstration, I want to show you that when you prune, you want to prune like that. No, you definitely don't want to prune like that, okay? This will rot away and it'll cause disease. A little branch won't be that big of a deal, but when you have thicker branches and you do this, it becomes a big deal. Trust me. It doesn't seal itself off, and if it does, it waits a long time before it does, and by then you have some disease that'll spread throughout the whole tree. So you don't want to do that cutting off that way, okay? So come in and cut close to the edge of what they call the little crotch, okay? And just cut it right there so it heals. It will heal perfectly there. Now another issue that people bring up a lot of times, oh yeah, make sure you put some kind of a paste that contains some copper, and some people use Vaseline, copper. They have all their little formulas, and they sell a commercial wound sealer. I have never used a wound sealer. I have never had a problem. Just make sure you do your cuts this way and you should be fine. Some universities actually say don't use it. Other places and universities and agronomists say yes, use it. I don't know. It's very popular in South and Central America. They definitely use copper and they mix it with something. I can't remember, it's Vaseline. I'm not sure if it's Vaseline, but I've heard people say that. But they do make a paste, kind of like a toothpaste, and it's usually like a blue color, and then they'll come in there and they'll hit that, and that's what they swear by. But I've never had a problem. All right, so the last point that I want to leave you with is that because the trees are growing in containers, and I recommend that you grow the red Jaboticaba in a container for the best control of the soil acidity, moisture, and so on. You got to remember that at some point, if this tree is going to maintain its entire life growing in a container, it can be done, just like bonsais, right? You have bonsais that are, 50, 60, 70, 80, who knows, hundreds of years old. In Japan and in Asian countries, they have a very, very old bonsai. I might be exaggerating when I say a couple of hundred years, but it's possible, because all you have to do, someone be around to take care of the tree, continue to root prune, and you have this amazing specimen tree. Well, you can have the same thing. You can have a container grown plant, like a Jaboticaba, that produces beautiful fruit all over it, and then you can maintain it in a container. So what you have to do is, at least, at a minimum, 18 months to 2 years, you take your tree out of your container, and you've got to go in there and you've got to root prune the tree. So that's important, and we'll do a video on that when the time comes that this guy needs to get root pruned. There'll probably be about another year. I want to wrap this video up. I want to thank you for watching and staying with me this long. Consider becoming a member. There'll be some specific videos that I'll create and if you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Let us know what you're doing with your Jaboticaba trees, and we hope you found it helpful. And everybody, thank you. You all have a great evening or a great morning or whatever you're having. Take care.